Right, let's turn to this matter now. Gauteng Traffic Police have impounded about 30 Bajaj Qute vehicles for allegedly operating without valid licenses. Officials say the new and yellow vehicles operating in parts of Johannesburg have been impounded since last Friday. They say when confronted with traffic officers, drivers abandon the vehicles and disappear. Gauteng Traffic Police spokesperson Sello Maremane says the majority of these vehicles operate in the Johannesburg CBD, Braamfontein, as well as Westbury. Right, let's get more details on this. We're joined now in conversation by Sello Maremane, speaking on behalf of the Gauteng Traffic Police. Sello, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Where are these vehicles coming from, and how do they get to South Africa and operate on our roads?
Good evening to you and to the viewers at home. Well, we were just conducting our law enforcement operation around Johannesburg area. We came across these vehicles, the yellow vehicles, the model being called Bajaj. But to our shock or consternation was the fact that these vehicles are operating in Johannesburg CBDs, in the areas like Westbury, somewhere in Cresta malls. They came like in large numbers. They were undertaking public passenger transport services without operating license. A situation which we abhor as law enforcement officials, because this kind of situation really has the potential to spark taxi conflict, because it's illegal for them to do so. Yeah. So they are operating in the vicinity of Johannesburg.
Right. So there are two degrees of registration. Of course, there's a registration of the ownership of the vehicles, and then there's a registration of operating as passenger transport. Let's start with the first one. Are these registered, and to whom are they registered? Are they registered to a single person? Who owns them?
Well, our investigations are still underway as to who are the registered owners of these vehicles. At this moment, I'm not at liberty to disclose who the owners are, but we are all on top of the situation. However, in terms of your question two, remember any person undertaking public passenger transport, that person must have an operating license. Whether it's a company or it's a person in their private capacity, they need to have an operating license or a permit for that matter. And the law allows us to, impound such vehicles if people are operating without operating licenses or permits, or even operating contrary to the conditions laid down in the permit. So this kind of vehicle didn't have operating licenses at all. So it creates a problem for us as law enforcement officials.
Do you know if there was any attempt at registering? Did any of these vehicles, there a trace of whether they tried to obtain documents, they had submitted documents, maybe they were still awaiting some kind of response?
Not at all. I personally myself went to the system where the operating licenses, the applications are being done today. Not a single vehicle that we have impounded, in as far as this vehicle is concerned, have actually tried to apply for the operating license. So there were no attempts at all to apply for operating licenses from their side. However, these vehicles are registered in terms of the law. So in other words, they've got registered owners. The problem is that they do not have operating licenses or permits, and we cannot leave the situation as is, because this has the potential to endanger the lives of other road users, and also it has the potential to spark taxi conflicts, because there are minibus, taxi types, any form of public transport passenger that one would like to undertake. Yeah. People are licensed and they are having operating license to do so. So we cannot allow people just to come in the space and operate without operating licenses.
Yeah. But let's look at the other qualifications. Are they modes of transport that are compatible with the vehicles that are on the roads in South Africa? In other words, are they roadworthy vehicles?
This vehicle, when one looks at them, they are roadworthy. Some of them might have a problem with indicators also, but generally we found them to be roadworthy. The only challenging problem is the fact that they are not in possession of operating licenses. Remember, when a vehicle is issued with an operating license, there will be conditions as to where will this vehicle be picking up passengers, where will they be offloading, which route they will be utilizing. So you can imagine if they are going to be allowed or they operate without operating license, is just going to be chaotic in the minibus taxi type industry, a situation which we would want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah. So did you have a word with any of the drivers who were operating the vehicles? Are they owner drivers, or are they just drivers who were hired by somebody to drive the vehicle? What actually happened? Because we believe some of them just abandoned the vehicles, or is it some of them, or is it all of them at this particular point?
Some of the drivers decided to abandon the vehicle along the side of the public road. For sure, it means they would have known that they are required to have had operating license. Those which we managed to interview, they told us that no, there's a certain company who gave this vehicle to them, and they were not at liberty to tell us the name of the company which did so. Hence, I'm saying that investigations are still underway to locate who the owners of these vehicles are. But I must say that the majority of the drivers actually, just abandoned this vehicle alongside our public road. So it's a large number. I mean, from Friday last week until Tuesday, 17 of these vehicles were actually impounded just yesterday. So there's the mushrooming of this kind of vehicles to be utilized around Johannesburg area without operating licenses.
Yeah. Russell, I'm trying to understand, how do these, I mean, you've already mentioned that, for example, they would need to have permits to park wherever they would need to park, wherever they would need to collect people and so on and so forth. How do they operate? How are they working? I mean, did they just offload vehicles, get here, and start picking up people? How are they picking up people? How are commuters engaging or even ordering these modes of transport?
Remember, we are just doing like normal law enforcement duty where we are able to see that a vehicle is picking up passengers for reward. So we realize that there is this mushrooming of, they are like orange, you are able to spot them. But as to how they conduct their business, where they are picking these people up, they pick them up along the side of the road and take them to their nearest destination. So when you look at it, it's like they are operating like you are Bolt and Ubers and type of a thing. But the problem really to us is the fact that they don't have operating licenses. This may spark taxi violence. We don't want that to happen in our province.
Could that then not mean that you might need to engage with some of those applications, those platforms, be it Bolt, be it Taxify, wherever platform they are operating from, to get an understanding of how they get on the roads without operating licenses?
That's correct. That's what we are trying to unlock at this moment as our investigations are busy unfolding, just to check where this vehicle originates and how. My main worry is I did my own, investigation this whole day. None of these vehicles have tendered their applications for an operating license. So it's just pure illegality that we are dealing with here.
And what does this mean then in terms of passengers who would be using these vehicles?
Say that again?
What does this mean for passengers who would be ordering and using these vehicles?
Well, we are encouraging our passengers not to board on this vehicle. I mean, it's illegal for these people to be operating. One other worrying factor, when one looks at we are still to get into thorough investigation, because remember, a public passenger vehicle needs to have specifications that conforms with the SABS. We really want to get to the bottom of this issue. For example, some of these vehicles are not even able to catch a speed. I think the maximum speed of this vehicle is 100 kilometers per hour. And you can imagine if they are going to be utilizing them on the freeways where people sometimes even over exceed our speed limit to an extent of driving 200 kilometers per hour on a freeway. And these vehicles come and it drives 40 kilometers per hour. They are just going to endanger, the lives of ordinary passengers.
And at this particular moment, what's the requirement then for them to be removed from the impoundment? For example, we just heard recently that in another province, people would pay, suppose 7,000 rands for the first offense, 14,000 rands for the second offense to release the cars. Is there such a dispensation in Gauteng? How are they able to release those cars?
That's correct. If they admit that they are guilty, they may approach our offices. They will get a fine of 1,500 admission of guilt fine for having operated this vehicle without operating license. They have to pay additional 3,500 rand, which makes it all to be 5,000 rand before they can get their vehicles back. So they pay 1,500 for admission of guilt in terms of them driving without operating licenses or permit, and the 3,500 is for the impoundment fee that the vehicle has been stored in our vicinity. So all in all, it's 5,000 rand per vehicle.
And you're able to track, after having paid that, if they continue again. So in other words, you catch it again on the roads, you'll be able to know that this is the same vehicle that we caught 2 weeks ago.
That's correct. Hence, we are keeping records of every vehicle that we shall have impounded, or every vehicle that has paid admission of guilt. So we are able to check, the frequency of how these people are committing this kind of offenses.
All right, Sello, much appreciated. Thanks for coming on. Sello Maremane there, speaking on behalf of the Gauteng Traffic Police.